Thank you. Thank you, Nathaniel. Thank you, Buckley program at Yale, and thank you all in the audience for being here today. Last semester, here at Yale, I had the privilege to teach a course on the intellectual legacy of William F. Buckley, Jr. In this course, I dedicated a couple of weeks to Bill Buckley's anti-communism as a principled and philosophical position. Bill Buckley once told me, late in his life, that his most important book may have been Odyssey of a Friend, a book in which Buckley, uncharacteristically, barely says or writes anything, but in which he creates a sort of a literary and philosophical interview with Whittaker Chambers. In Odyssey, we see Chambers again bare his soul, this time directly to a young admirer, friend, and colleague. Rereading parts of these two books in preparation for this conference, I was struck most of all by the deep emotional intensity and raw humanity that flows out of so many of these pages. A man is trying to account to himself and to the world how he made his choices, where he fell and where he blundered, but also, though there is no going back, how doing the right thing can still mean everything, and not just for his own soul, but for his family, country, and his generation. Bill Buckley, as some of you here know, was a dramatic and emotional man, very much so. And so it is not surprising to me that Chambers' Odyssey moved Bill profoundly. And as my students know, Bill Buckley had many formative influences, but the comet in his life that was Chambers certainly ranks as the most unexpected, mysterious, and intense. And so I applaud the choice of this work, Witness, as the one to follow last year's God and Man at Yale for this, our second annual Buckley Program conference. To help us get started today, we have produced three distinguished gentlemen who know much about the subject. Lee Edwards, sitting in the middle, is a distinguished fellow in conservative thought at the Heritage Foundation's B. Kenneth Simon Center for Principles and Politics. Dr. Edwards has enjoyed a career as one of the leading historians of American conservatism. His works have ranged from biographies of President Reagan to a recent biography of William F. Buckley. Dr. Edwards is the founding director of the Institute of Political Journalism at Georgetown and is a fellow at the Institute of Politics at the JFK School of Government at Harvard. John Lewis Gaddis, right next to me, is one of the leading historians of the Cold War. Professor Gaddis won the Pulitzer Prize for his biography of the diplomat George F. Kennan. Professor Gaddis's work as the Robert A. Lovett Professor of History has influenced the works of Cold War historians all over the world and has played a major role in uncovering the role of leadership personalities in determining Cold War policies. The influence of Gaddis's work on the narrative of the Cold War can be seen in the 24-part CNN television series Cold War. And finally, M. Stanton Evans, a graduate of Yale University, class of, can you help me? 1955, sorry, I was missing that detail. Mr. Evans has been one of the leading members of the conservative movement in the United States. His book, Blacklisted by History, The Untold Story of Senator Joe McCarthy and His Fight Against America's Enemies, gives an account of the age of McCarthyism during the Cold War. Evans has been the recipient of honorary doctorates from such institutions as Syracuse University and the John Marshall Law School, and has won the Accuracy in Media Reed Irvine Award for Excellence in Journalism. Please join me now in welcoming our panelists. And Lee, would you like to start us?
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Well, it's such a pleasure and really an honor to be here. Once again, I was flattered to be asked to participate in the first seminar last year, and I guess I didn't do too badly because here I am back again today. And I see some good friends out here and also some people whom I admire so terribly much, including Senator Jim Buckley. And he certainly deserves a round of applause, I think, for his service. Well, let us begin with a paradox. Whittaker Chambers was a Soviet spy who became, in Bill Buckley's words, the most important American defector from communism. Chambers' public witness about the seductive attractions of communism and its treasonous adherents began in August of 1948, when he identified Alger Hiss, a golden boy of the liberal establishment, as a fellow member of his underground communist cell in the 1930s. Hiss was a former assistant to the Secretary of State and advisor to President Franklin D. Roosevelt at Yalta, the acting Secretary General of the United Nations Founding Conference at San Francisco, and recently named president of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. He emphatically denied Chambers' allegation. And a great deal more than the reputations of these two men was at stake. If Hiss was innocent, anti-communism, and those closely associated with it, like Richard Nixon, a prominent member of the Congressional Investigating Committee, would be dealt a devastating blow. If Hiss was guilty, anti-communism would occupy a prominent part of the political landscape, and its spokesmen would become national leaders. Furthermore, Chambers and Hiss each represented one side in the epic struggle of the Cold War. One man symbolized the philosophy of freedom and Western civilization. The other, the ideology of totalitarianism and Marxism-Leninism. Both left and right understood that America and the world was at a critical point in history. Consider the major political events that transpired between August of 1948, when Chambers confronted Hiss at a congressional hearing, and May of 1952, when Chambers published his managerial and magisterial memoir, Witness. In February 1948, the communists seized control of Czechoslovakia through a coup d'etat. It was the first Soviet seizure by force of a free popular government, and it stunned official Washington. In China, Mao Zedong's People's Liberation Army had Chiang Kai-shek's nationalist forces on the run, and the following year, the communists would assume command of the world's most populous nation. 1950 was a particularly eventful year. In January, the scientist Carl Fuchs surrendered to British authorities, admitting he was a nuclear spy. The same month, Alger Hiss was convicted of perjury, the statute of limitations on espionage having expired, and he was sent to jail. In May, the FBI arrested Harry Gold, who identified Julius and Ethel Rosenberg as fellow conspirators in a plot to give nuclear secrets to Moscow. And in June, North Korea invaded South Korea and presented the U.S. with a choice: either turn back the invasion or allow the communists to secure a key piece on the chessboard of Asia. And in 1952, Whittaker Chambers published Witness, which argued what? That the United States faced a transcendent, not a transitory crisis. That the crisis was not one of politics or economics, but of faith. And that secular liberalism, the dominant ism of the day, was a watered-down version of communism. No wonder the liberals have never forgiven Chambers, nor have they been able to forget him. At this point, I want to offer a few observations about the other man in the case, and I know that Stan is also going to be talking about him a little bit. And that man is of course, Alger Hiss. Because I do not believe you can fully understand Chambers and his place in history without examining Hiss. Well, I'm able to call upon an expert witness, Chicago Tribune reporter Willard Edwards, who observed Alger Hiss for an estimated 500 hours during the congressional